It is my deep pleasure to welcome our panel tonight to discuss this incredibly important topic. Last year, I asked Bob Cooper and Glenn Funk to help me think about how we might pull together a couple of Sunday school classes around the topic of caring for our city. Jeremiah reminds us that it is our call to really weep for our city. And how do we engage it and its problems? I think that's one of the most important aspects of our collective community. We don't retreat from, but we engage in. And how do we engage in some of the most challenging problems that face us? And so I want to call Bob Cooper up to introduce the panel that he was so good to bring together and welcome us. Bob, thanks.
Thanks, Guy, and appreciate everyone being here this morning. This is a very important topic, as evidenced by all of y'all being here. This is as Guy said, a follow-up to a program that was we had a few weeks ago with Sheriff Hall, and he talked about the Behavioral Care Center that he has developed at the Sheriff's Office, which touches on one element of the broader problem that we're going to be talking about today, which is the homeless population in Nashville. And I can't think of a better panel that we could have here to talk about this. I'm going to introduce the moderator, who will then introduce everyone else on the panel. And I'm doing that as a point of personal privilege since he's one of my law partners, Jeff Gibson. More importantly, he has for many years been on the board of directors of Room in the Inn and a past president. And more specifically for today's program, he has been a member the past 3 years of Metro's Continuum of Care Homeless Planning Council. And you're going to hear a lot about that and the work that Metro and other groups are doing today. The council has the modest charge of building an effective system to prevent and end homelessness in Nashville. And part of that is to educate the public. And so we've got no better or more knowledgeable group of people here to do that. And so I'm going to turn this over to Jeff to get us started. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Bob. And it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having us. I'm delighted to be joined by a really incredible panel who can speak probably more eloquently than anyone in the city on some of the issues that we're facing. And I think this will be a great opportunity for us to learn. We encourage you to ask questions. We'd like for this to be an interactive discussion. So if we hit on a topic that is of interest to you, please feel free to raise a hand and we can engage. To my immediate left is Rachel Hester, Executive Director of Room in the Inn. I know this church has had a long history with Room in the Inn, and we're greatly appreciative of that. To Rachel's left is Brian Hale. Brian is the CEO of Neighborhood Health, a really impressive organization that is focused on providing much needed healthcare services to our homeless population. To Brian's left is April Calvin. April is the director of Metro's newly formed Office of Homeless Services. We're going to start with April, and we're going to let April give a little bit of an overview of her organization and the structure with which Metro operates in the homeless space. I will warn you, it's a little bit complicated, and there's an interesting history, but Rachel will give a great overview there. So, April, I apologize. I'm already messing up as the moderator. I apologize. So, April, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, as the mic, yep, the mic's on. So, as everyone said earlier, this is the brand new Office of Homeless Services. Right before July, we were called Metro Homeless Impact Division. So same initiative, just new name, new title, new goals. So here we are. This is my contact information, and there's a lot of information in this slide. I'm just gonna peruse through it pretty fast. But if you were to need any more information, this is a great way to reach me. So our primary function would be to guide Metro's response as it relates to homelessness, community efforts, and community trainings. We also implement what's called a coordinated entry process. So when you have limited resources, the federal government says, then you need to coordinate the entry and access to those resources so that people that are in the most need or the most vulnerable will be able to access those resources. And then HMIS is the database in which we capture that information. It's called the Homeless Management Information Systems. And then we also implement funding opportunities. We coordinate outreach efforts, housing location services, and then other metro departments as well that help to move this these services along. 4 main divisions in our office is street outreach, coordinated entry, which I just spoke on, and then the homeless management information systems, and a landlord engagement component. Landlord engagement is huge for us because that's how we connect people to housing on the other side of homelessness. In any healthy crisis resolution system, you would have some core values, which would be being housing focused. What we know, the main thing that we need in order to end homelessness is housing options, housing resources, and then the support services to go along with them. Homeless population here in Nashville, veterans, people experiencing what we consider chronic homelessness, which means that they have a disabling condition and they've been homeless for at least a year as well. We have families, unaccompanied youth, and then other individuals. Our largest population of homelessness here in Nashville is single individual white males. Services that we provide in our community are prevention and diversion. I think if we had a really healthy, robust prevention and diversion effort, then that would kind of close the front door into homelessness. We provide encampment support, shelter opportunities, and then connection to permanent housing. So this is where Jeff has his claim to fame. Right before COVID, we had a really robust strategic plan. So it's a very complex process. And we had a lot of partners speak into that. And then COVID happened and we were all safer at home and we had to pivot and do more crisis housing options. And Jeff has been instrumental in helping us to move forward with our 2023 strategic plan. And it has 2 main goals, being urgent and responsive, and then aligned and accountable. Here's a little bit of information on that coordinated entry process. The main goal is, how do they access the system? How do you assess them? And then how do you prioritize them based on their vulnerability? And then referrals are made after that. You all may hear a lot about a point in time count, and we call it PIT because we say everything in acronyms here in homeless services, sorry. But the point in time count, it captures the sheltered number and the unsheltered number. What we know is this is a very moderate number because it's just a 1 day, 1 point in time count on homelessness. So last year, our numbers increased slightly, 11%. 2,129 people were experiencing homelessness that were captured on that night. That's not the true number for Nashville, I would like to say. And this is really a narrow definition of homelessness. It focuses more on those that are in shelter or those that were actually outside and were able to be counted. We know there's a lot of families that probably pay for hotels or sleep in cars or other places that may not be meant for habitation. Our current data and our HMIS system shows that this is the number, composition for individuals in households. And so as we talk about the number of homelessness, we also want to talk about the need. And here's on Nashville.gov's website, there's a report that is in Nashville.gov planning website, shows the housing need that we need based on the existing inventory. So existing inventory for people in the 0 to 30% AMI is just shy of 1,800, and the need 35,000. So some of those solutions are Barnes Fund. The Barnes Fund, they are committed to bringing on affordable construction of new rental and home ownership properties. And they would have to stay affordable for a 30-year time frame. And here, I don't think it's not interactive anymore because I stole it from a website. So here there's about 438 that came on within the last 3 years of people that are for housing for people that are in the 30% of AMI, which is the area median income. Also, another remedy to some of that 35,000. This is just barely, the peak of the iceberg, right? There was 25 million that was put into the GEO bonds, which is the Barnes Fund I just spoke on. Also, there's a 90-unit Charlie Strobel Center that's coming on. And then that will be on an early part of 2024. And here's some other remedies. Affordable Gap Loan, which, sorry, my bracelet's causing me problems here. The Affordable Gap Loan, and the Affordable Gap Loan is deeply affordable. It's how we get developers to help with building affordable units and then dedicating them to homelessness. And so they received an extra bonus points on their scorecard if they dedicated at least 10% of their units to affordable housing. And then those referrals will be made through my department. And there's some other resources there. We are, so it's a historic metro investment into Housing First. Housing First is essential because it's reducing all barriers, connecting people to housing, and then deploying those resources into the home. And we found that to be most successful. Other response will include shelter. So there's emergency shelters in town. What we try to ask them to do is increase access to resources. So my department will help with providing staff to those locations to connect people to resources. We want to decrease long stays in shelter and then reduce barriers, review and reduce the barriers that cause people to not be able to reside in shelters. And then that we're hoping those things will decrease the number of unsheltered population. Outdoor encampments, I know that's the one that's most visible to you all. What we know is people are really extremely vulnerable. Here in Nashville, our average length of people living outdoors is 5 years, which is higher than the national average. So our community came together and built an encampment strategy, about 15-page document. And it really speaks to collaboration, networking, and helping them move people into permanent housing. Another huge thing here for us in Nashville is seasonal demands. So we have spring storms, and my department is responsible for coordinating how to get people out of the storms and out of the floods. Summer heat response, you may have seen things where we were passing out water and giving cool rides and extra bus passes to connect people to shelters, libraries, and other places that they are typically welcome during the day. And then during the fall, as we're going into fall, there's typically a no burn season because of fires and because it's cold at night. Sometimes they set fires to stay warm. Nonprofits may pass out propane tanks to help them stay warm, but we do have a very serious concern with fire, and we have to implement a no burn season during that time. What we also like to talk about is our cold weather shelter. Cold weather shelter in Nashville is a huge thing. Before, maybe 3 years ago, the temperature was 28 degrees. Last year, the community was instrumental in getting that increase to 32 degrees. And so if the temperatures are below 32 degrees for 3 consecutive hours, then there is sheltering that's provided. And it's a huge undertaking. Everyone at this table is a part of it. There are other nonprofits that provide services. WeGo, our bus system, Metro Social Services, Fire and OEM. There's a lot of partners that go into that. And on average, they house 170 people per night on the nights that cold weather shelter is open. Metro Social Services does. That does not include the work that is happening here with you all and Room in the Inn as well. So I'll talk about a lot of services that are being provided. There's a larger group that's providing the work as well. Our continuum of care is just a group, we call it the COC. It's a group of people that are all dedicated to ending and reducing homelessness here in Nashville. And so it could be anywhere from nonprofits, faith-based initiatives, and state and local government. This is what that work looks like. It's really busy. There's a lot. There's a lot of committees. I want to say, if you want to get actively involved, if you are, needing some excitement in your life, we have robust meetings. And these are different areas that you can lend your expertise. Housing First. What's Housing First? We talked about that a little bit. Housing First is connecting people to housing without any preconditions, without any barriers, and not saying that they have to be sober in order to get connected to housing, but deploying all of those resources that we know will help them remain in the housing location. So Housing First is what I would say, but not housing only. Support services are heavily needed. And here's some other initiatives. You all may have been a part of the Family 100-Day Challenge. They had a kickoff August 29th, and December 9th, I think it's when they end. And they're at about 25 to 28 families that's been housed within the first 30 days. So this is exciting work here. Call to action. I think I'll leave this up as we kind of go down the table, and other panelists can speak, but I think that here are some great ways that you guys can get actively involved if you are so led to.
Thank you, April. Sorry, we have a question.
Is the Metro school system still involved with helping homeless children as well? And can you speak to that?
Yeah. So Catherine Knowles, she's the leader of our Heroes program, and it's a program that's heavily embedded in all of Metro schools, and they partner with other shelter providers and other nonprofits as well to help ensure several things. One, that kids can remain in the school that they were zoned for prior to becoming homeless. Also, that they can have access to all of the information that they would need, whether it's like those $200 calculators that their families can't afford. They will continue to provide ongoing supplies for the family. Oh, yes, that is important. So that number that I showed, what was it, 2,100 people experiencing homelessness here in Nashville, that is based on the HUD's definition of literal homelessness, meaning that they're in a shelter or they're outside. The McKinney-Vento Act is what the HERO program follows, and it is a much broader definition for homelessness. And in that, people that are sleeping in their cars, people that are doubled up, meaning that they're sleeping on someone's sofa, but their family's name is not on the lease, or in hotels. So she has a much larger number of people that are experiencing homelessness here in Nashville.
Thank you, April. So April just did an outstanding job in that slide presentation of synthesizing an amazingly complex amount of information. There are so many intricacies here. We will try to touch on some of them during this panel, but I just wanted to, it's one of the things that I've come to realize, and perhaps I should have known from the get-go, is this is an extraordinarily complex problem, and coordinating the efforts in this city to address this problem is a lot of the work that April does, but it's amazing how complicated it really is. April mentioned and kind of joked on the 32-degree number for when we opened Metro Shelter. You would not believe how difficult it was to rise from 28 degrees to 32 degrees as our measure. That was an incredibly complicated move over the course of years. And so I just wanted to point that out. It may be obvious. It wasn't obvious to me when I started working in this area, but it's an amazingly complex area. All right, I'm going to hand it to Rachel Hester now and let her give a brief overview of Room in the Inn. Again, you guys know a lot about Room in the Inn's winter shelter program. You've been a participant for many, many years, which we're greatly appreciative of. But Rachel can talk a little bit more about what Room in the Inn does otherwise.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having us actually Homelessness is not a topic that most people want to talk about. You know, it's something that we all see when we're driving in, but how Room in the Inn has always approached our answers to homelessness is to include everyone. And so we want to thank Westminster Pres for being part of that with your shelter program. But what we also have at downtown at our location is a single site of services for people that are experiencing homelessness. They come to us in crisis, needing a meal, needing a medical stay, or needing publicly intoxicated, or they also need just a place to come in and out of the elements. But what we hope happens is they stay with us and they want to move to the next level where they're participating in their journey. We can help navigate them to better services and then eventually permanent housing. But nobody's going to get permanent housing on day one, so we have to enter into a relationship with everyone. We see about 200 people in the summertime each day, and in the wintertime, 400 individuals each day. And we see probably about 4,500 unique individuals throughout the winter season. We could not do this without the help of Westminster, but also all the congregations that do Room in the Inn. COVID kind of punched us in the gut. So when you see the cold weather numbers at 170 individuals going to the city's cold weather shelter, when Room in the Inn congregations are participating at the level they were pre-COVID, that number goes down because we have more beds in our city that don't cost as much money. And they include citizens like you who have a face-to-face experience with someone who's experiencing homelessness and understand how complex these issues are, not just by what we tell you. So that is what Room in the Inn does. I don't need to tell you more than anybody. You've been involved, but I thought it was really important to understand how we work with the city and how we work with United Neighborhood.
Before the panel this morning, we were talking with Guy about all of the ways your congregation has pivoted to continue to provide services at Room in the Inn, and we're just greatly appreciative. Okay, coming at homelessness from a bit of a different perspective is Brian Hale, who again is the CEO of Neighborhood Help. And so Brian, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your organization and how you help to address the issues we're facing?
Sure. So I want everybody, if you would, just put your finger right here on your neck for me. How many of you feel a pulse? That's not a good answer, folks. Come on now. Right. If you felt a pulse, you can be a patient at Neighborhood Help. Okay, so this is important context for what I'm going to say next. I'm a medical patient at Neighborhood Health. I'm a dental patient at Neighborhood Health. I'm one of 30,000 people who get their health care at Neighborhood Health. But one of the divisions that we have within our organization is our homelessness services, and it serves about 5,000 people each year in the counties that we serve. Now, let me talk to you about the sort of variation in our medical practice, and then we're going to talk about three very important words. So Neighborhood Health has 2 clinics that focus on immigrants and refugees. We have 2 clinics that focus on people experiencing homelessness. We have 2 clinics in public housing communities, and we have 1 and soon to be 2 clinics in rural areas. It's a pretty heterogeneous medical practice. It is also the largest safety net provider of primary care in Middle Tennessee, the largest for African Americans and the largest for Hispanic patients. So it's a pretty neat place. I'm pretty happy to work there. I'm pretty blessed to be able to do that with support from folks like you. The 3 words that are really important before we even get to healthy are safe, warm, and dry. If you're not safe, warm, and dry, you're not going to be healthy. Okay, so one of the things that we do is reimagine healthcare with the idea that someone experiencing homelessness, or frankly anybody, but particularly those who are unhoused, are safe, warm, and dry. So as a medical supply, we hand out sleeping bags, we hand out tarps, and we hand out COVID test kits, right? So medical supplies mean something a little bit different to us. What is the most important medical supply that we distribute? Bus passes, which makes our partnership with WeGo incredibly important. So it's a very different vantage on the healthcare system. Now, I'm not unhoused, I'm not uninsured, and I still go to Neighborhood Health, one of our 11 clinics, right? So you can be a patient at Neighborhood Health to support what we're doing. And it's kind of neat because all of that feeds back through, and the care that I get is the same care that the unhoused person gets, and vice versa. The care that they get's the same, with the care that they're going to receive, I'm going to get the same thing. So that's a value of our organization that I think is particularly important when we look at what we want to do: safe, warm, and dry. And then we get to help. The part here that I think is really interesting, and that one of the reasons I love this work, is if you picked up Rachel's cell phone April's number is going to be there. If you picked up April's number, cell phone, my number is going to be there. We text and call each other all the time. And that's relationship that makes a system work. So we can talk about structures, and I think they're hugely important, but it's relationships that you call Friday at 6 o'clock and say, Brian, I got bad news. We may have a COVID outbreak. Do you have any tests? Or I call Rachel, I call Rachel, but I call April and I say, April, we just got someone discharged from Vanderbilt that was discharged to street. I don't have a place for them, but they've got wound care needs that's not going to be okay for an encampment. And so what do we do in that context? How do we work together? And it's these phone calls that make it work. It's also your gifts that help us figure this kind of stuff out, because that, what do you do at 6 o'clock on Friday when someone's been discharged to street with pretty profound wound care needs? And the answer is you don't send them back to the ER, because what happens on Friday night at the ER? They need that space for somebody else. So it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that that person has somewhere to go. And it's these relationships that make things happen. I want to say one other quick thing about Nashville. We have a lot of problems. We have 5,000 people that just see us that are unhoused. Okay? This is a big deal, and we should be convicted if we take the words of Leviticus seriously when they talk about what in Leviticus? Widows, orphans, and immigrants. And I think Shane Claiborne talks about what does immigrant mean, or what does foreigner mean in that context. It means anyone who is not of the tribe of Judah. So anybody unhoused, anybody marginalized, anybody other than us, whoever that us is, and frankly, that's the unhoused. So both in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, we are called and commanded to do this work. And that's important. And thank you for being here to take that commitment, that covenant that we need to have seriously. Now, here's why I'm optimistic. 28 degrees to 32 took a long time, a lot of hard work, but it happened. We had no transportation system for shelter. It took a long time and a really painful procurement, but we've got it done. We've got a way to get people from downtown to a new shelter, a shelter that is not the old jail, that's what it was in the old days, Old Harding Pike, the old jail down there. That's where the shelter was, people literally behind bars for shelter, not trauma informed. Now we have a much better shelter space on Brick Church Pike. So I'm optimistic about where things are going, but it's because of commitment and involvement of people like you that are driving this forward, and we need that to continue. I want to say one last thing about neighborhood health, because I have to bring this back to what we do, and I think it makes our organization interesting. You see board of directors there, and that's really important, but our organization is special. More than half of the people on our board have to be patients of our clinic. That's federal law. 3 of our board members have lived experience with homelessness. And let me tell you something, if they're at their doctor and something's not right, they pick up that phone in relationship and call me and say, Brian, the security guard wasn't nice to me today. Brian, what's going on? Why is the paint not fixed? Brian, I thought you told me we were going to get the intercom system working better. Now, that's the kind of patient commitment and involvement that you want to see in your doctor's office, which is why you want to come be our patient. But it's also what makes this successful. So I'm optimistic, but I think the Bible tells us that we've got to keep working because we've got a lot more we're commanded to do.
Aren't you glad I recommended them? Yeah.
I want to commend you for your Leviticus reference there. That's really, it's a wonderful thing to remember. April mentioned a concept, housing first. That is really a policy or a principle that is accepted at every level, federal, state, local level. That's the way to combat homelessness. As April mentioned, though, housing first doesn't mean housing only. So we can't focus on just putting people in housing and ignoring the supportive services that go along with it. However, for this question, we are going to do that because I want to ask about what the city and organizations within the city are doing to expand the inventory of housing. So maybe April, you want to give some thoughts there, and I think Rachel could follow up.
So I won't talk about the Charlie Strobel Center because I know Rachel wants to talk about that center, but for Metro, I think maybe I can go back to that slide. I may have a little bit of information here. There's developer incentive out of the $25 million GAP, deeply affordable GAP loan, meaning that any developer that has identified a gap in their financing, we can give them a small, low-interest loan that will help to bring on at least 10% of their units for people that are experiencing homelessness. And in the first round, it brought on 63 units. Not a lot, but to think that for 30 years, they're dedicated to homelessness, it's huge because that's the first of its kind to have dedicated units. And now that RFP is open for the second round of funding as well. Another huge thing to think about there is it's a loan, so they will pay that back and we'll be able to use those funds. So they're able to bring on units that will help with affordability. Another thought is, let's see, the landlord engagement department here that's under our Office of Homeless Services. Landlord engagement is the most important part of any healthy housing crisis resolution system. You have to have landlords that's willing to rent to people that have experienced homelessness. So we have an incentive plan if people have rental properties that they are willing to join. We call it, they're going to be a member of our club, right? Landlord Low Barrier Housing Collective Club, meaning that they're going to reduce barriers. People that are experiencing homelessness may not make 3 times the income. They may not have a good credit record, and they most likely or may not have great criminal history as well. But overlooking some of those barriers, knowing that they will have some voucher subsidies that will be attached to that unit and the support services of nonprofits and other faith-based organizations will be deployed to that location as well. Yes, we have 145 properties that are part of that scope of work. And we have, 157. 145 stuck in my mind for a long time, but it's now up to 157. And that just means that there's people that, one thing I do want to highlight is the First Foundation offered landlord mitigation funds to United Way because they were under the impression that people that have experienced homelessness is going to come in and tear up the units. And we have to have some funds that will correct whatever repairs need to happen. And 2 years of me being in this position, we've only used it 4 times. Now, the number of people we house per month is averaging 150 people per month. So imagine in 2 years, only needing to utilize that 4 times. It just shows the level of work that's going into getting people prepared and ready for housing, and also the amount of services that's deployed into the homes as well. So if you know of anyone that have rental properties, a shameless plug, right? If you if you know of anyone that has rental properties or that would like to connect to my office, my contact information was on the very front slide, so I'll go there as well. But I think here, this shows the need. When I think about the 35,000 units, I thought it was a typo.
There's another big issue right now that people in the 3150 who can't afford, maybe employees, but can't afford to live in that.
Which are all of our employees,
Yes, yes. I mean,
every one of our employees.
and so that's a separate issue, but also one to be mindful that the housing crisis in Nashville extends way beyond what we consider the actively homeless population. There's a much bigger issue that we need to figure out how to address.
So, the drum has been beating for a long time about the need for affordable housing. I can remember 10 years ago, 20 years ago, Charlie saying the same thing, and the number wasn't 35,000. And when Mayor Dean was the mayor, he said, he brought this up as an issue, and it was part of his talks. And Charlie, I remember him very clearly sitting across and saying, well, if we're going to ask everybody else to do it, we need to do it too. And so that's when we began with building 38 affordable housing units at Room in the Inn. We try to find the gap of services. And so we house individuals who have very complicated backgrounds, mostly because of our location, but mostly because of our relationships. There's no reason for someone to find their community on the streets and live there until the day they die. We can also be that community in a healthy way as well. And I am proud to say that in the next month, we'll open up 10 additional apartments that we've been renovating in the last year. So we'll have a total of 48, and we purchased 2 pieces of property in our location to look again toward what does a building affordable housing look like. When Father Stroll passed away about a month and a half ago, the mayor's office also called as they are building a 90-unit facility near the Sound Stadium. And we have been involved in that conversation since Mayor Barry and with Office of Resilience, if you remember that, Office of Resilience, and worked with the Bloomberg Foundation on what that could look like. And that has taken several iterations. This is the one that kind of came to pass. And it's 91 bedroom apartments, not 91 units, 91 bedroom apartments. And they asked, would Father Strobel be okay with us naming it after him? And I said that he would hate it 100%, but he would only be okay if every time you talk about it, you remind people of the need for the rest of the housing. This is not well done. We've done a good job. This is only the beginning. And I think we cannot be okay in a first world city to have people sleeping outdoors. Everyone deserves a home. And, you know, we can talk about making encampments nicer and giving people, you know, nice blankets and sleeping bags, but that is not a home. And we shouldn't be okay with that. And mental health and addiction hits every one of our families. If you take just a minute and think about people in your life that your family has scooped up and made sure they haven't fallen out of systems, everyone doesn't have that. And so we should be all every single day saying everyone deserves a home. It's in everything we do, but it starts with the beginning to welcome the strangers in, making sure that they feel safe, and then they will tell us the rest of the story. And then those of us who are doing the policy and going to all the meetings that you don't want to go to, we can say, and this is how our population has changed. And these are the people that we're serving today.
I work as a volunteer with a slightly different population. I work with probably 50 to 75 families a month, or total people a month, who need healthcare. So I'm a great proponent of neighborhood health. I talk about them all the time. But many of these people do have housing issues, and they don't qualify for the HERO program because they don't have a child in school. Those people seem to be in our city at least connected. And I think there's this population of single mothers with very young children. And I wonder if you have some thoughts about how to connect them to some services. They're not, quote, homeless. They often have something of a job, or they're looking for a job and they can get a part of a job. But it's nowhere near enough money to support 1 or 2 children. They're in the 0 to 150% poverty range.
So there's a large initiative, we call it the 2Gen initiative, 2 generation of addressing poverty. So you're not just addressing it for the mom or for the single or the child. And I would say a good contact would be United Way. Rod DeVore is the leader of, now I don't say pass that name and number out to the whole community, but if you connect with him, then he can connect you with the agencies that's a part of that scope of work. And you don't have to be homeless to be a part of that 2Gen program. Some call it Pathway of Hope. Some call it the Family Collective. I couldn't think of it. There it is. The Family Collective. And they will help families to increase their income, increase their education, connect them to community. It's a robust body of work.
First of all, thank you for helping connect us with people that we can help. So I really appreciate that, and it's good to see you. Fun fact, in the fourth quarter of 2021, when we were doing field-based COVID testing, our street medicine team goes out to encampments 4 days a week. We had more positive pregnancy tests than we had positive COVID tests. And I want to take the issue of this has become, this has accelerated since the implementation of the Dobbs decision and Tennessee's complete abortion ban. At least twice a week, we have women who come into our office and are clear victims of intimate partner violence. Last week, we had someone who was decided to flee. We had called 50 shelters in 3 states and found no beds. What you are describing is terrible, and it's about to get a lot worse. And we have got to get ahead of that as a community. Now, I was optimistic a few moments ago, and I'm still optimistic now, but I think you're pointing to a very real problem that this state is completely unprepared to address. And please keep talking about it, because the resources required to address what we're about to see are not available right now. And thank you for advocating to make sure they're there.
I also think it's fair for us to talk about, there's not enough shelters for women and children in our city. The Mission is getting ready to open their doors in the next month, and they're already over capacity for families. So if the, thank you. I'm a little close to this, to it all. So the Women's Mission has been sharing space with the Men's Mission, and they have been rebuilding their facility over near Metro Center. That is opening in the next month-ish. And they are already at capacity for their families, for their family area. My staff took a tour last week. We have to help the family safe haven. Like the continuum is large. So if adult homelessness is not your issue, then maybe go down the pike and go, okay, well, where are the children, falling into the river? Is it with the foster care system? Is it with the 2 gens away and the families who are on the economic cliff getting ready to fall off? Is it, do I need to really engage with troubled youth? Where is it that you fit in? Because by the time that they get to room in the inn, they've already fallen out of systems that were there to protect them, right? And I wrote them down because it always comes up: education, housing, family, employment, justice, behavioral health, and even religion. If we think about that, right? And so I think we need to make sure that you find the thing that you're passionate about and plug in, and you will impact homelessness.
I want to touch on a very specific issue that's been in the news a lot lately, and that is encampments. I don't know, maybe April, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of that issue from your perspective?
Thank you. So about 2 years ago, that's when I started here. Before COVID, after COVID, I'm stuck there, but now I say when I started and before I started, right? So what we know about our encampments here in Nashville, the state has identified 32 encampments that have over 132 people living on their property. Metro has identified 15 to 25 encampments, and our total encampment or people living unsheltered, that number is hovering around 700 people living in Nashville that's unsheltered. That's why when we talk about housing, it's so important. So when we talk about building a healthy housing crisis resolution system, it's so important. So about maybe 12 months ago, we went to Mayor Cooper for a large historic investment into housing, or investment on our homeless concern here, and built a robust plan, that $50 million plan, which includes housing, includes temporary housing, supportive services, and incentivizing the landlords, and then also competitive grants for expanding capacity of our agencies. What we know on the other side of COVID is service providers have been having to be all things to all people for far too long. So we're looking to expand that capacity. Also, our encampments have languished. People have languished outside an average of 5 years, which that is higher than the national average, which is 2.3 years. Also, what we know about our encampments is that it is a growing elderly population there. There is our average age for the homeless population here in Nashville is 54. And that's because that's the age that they are, their life expectancy rate, living outside for far too long in the elements. And so our community drafted an encampment strategy. How do we move forward with addressing our unsheltered population? As I said, it's a 15-page document, a very complex issue, which comes with a complex resolution as well. And in that, we have identified camps based on their vulnerability, based on their safety and location, and environmental concerns. And so the vulnerability of the people is the first thing that we assess. There's a prioritization team that includes over 7 agencies here in Nashville, which is important to me so that it doesn't look like Metro is just doing a thing, right? This includes over 7 to 10 other agencies that will go out into the encampments and survey, do a huge survey the area, the people, and the environment. And then they base that score on whoever is the highest is the camp that we will address first. So you all probably have seen in the news quite a bit. Brookmead was the very first one. It was a camp that had lived there for over 20 years. Someone that lived there over 20 years himself. He said he was the one that started that camp. And the next location was Caldwell Park. And that was important to me because about 3 years ago, you all may remember, there was a flood. We have flash floods in that area, 7 Mile Creek, that's over there near South Nashville. And someone was sleeping there and was washed away in the flood. So not only does that prioritization tool assess the vulnerability of the people, also the environment and the location. I think that as a community, it may appear as though we don't all agree on how to address our unsheltered population. And I think the main takeaway of that is we don't have enough affordable housing to house everyone that's living outside. So we have to be great stewards of the funds that we do have. That interim gap housing was the first of its kind here in Nashville, so that if you're going to address, when I say address, meaning a housing surge, some call it a camp closure, I call it a housing surge. If we're going to perform a housing surge in an encampment, we need to have housing options for everyone that lives there. It is not enough just to close the location and move them down the street. We have some counterparts that are choosing to do that with some of the people that are sleeping on their property. And it just becomes an issue of displacing them even more. So for us, we're committed to ensuring that we have, whether it's permanent housing, whether it's a voucher subsidy, or the interim gap housing, which are in the interim gap housing, I'll talk about that a little bit. It's a hotel conversion, or it's churches like this that's converted space for people to live there on an ongoing basis until permanent housing is an option. For me, I want to make sure that we are scheduling our vulnerabilities at the top end of our system, like housing, instead of creating a lot of little things here at the bottom end. Because what I do know, if you build it, they will come. If you build it, it will grow. And if we don't have anything that releases the pressure valve, which is housing, we'll get stuck here at the bottom of our system, which is more about managing homelessness instead of ending and reducing homelessness.
Well, I think the easiest way to dip your toe in is to get engaged with your congregation. These are already your people that you're accountable to, right? Every week, y'all are seeing each other. And Westminster does that a few ways. We talked about that long continuum. So there's places here already in your ministry that you're doing that. With the people experiencing homelessness, you do that in 2 ways that I'm aware of. And that is at Room in the Inn. There's a sign up going around right now. We begin November 1st. We go to March 31st, and you house on, I believe it's Wednesday nights. Yes. And then you also do a regular meal for the people that are experiencing homelessness. We're Southerners, we don't know a lot, but we know how to do hospitality, and y'all make the best King Ranch casserole I've ever had. So I'm just going to say, we understand that, but it's just welcoming people in first. And then I do think we need each other. And so to continue these conversations, because if we only surround ourselves with people who have like ideas and like viewpoints, we're never going to grow as a city. And Mayor O'Connell, who we know very well because he was on the Homeless Planning Council, he was Room in the Inn and the Missions Council person for many years. He needs us to be engaged. We have to. So those are my cheers.
So one thing that I'd invite you to do, and this almost as a ritual, if you will, is, and I don't think you call it a foot washing clinic, but you have a feet hygiene clinic, and you can't help but be moved when God puts the feet of a fellow human being right before you, and you kneel down and wash. Start there. And go from there to safe, warm, and dry, and see where God leads you. So I don't have the answer for where you should volunteer, but God does. Start with that foot clinic and see where you go from there. But it's where you need to be called in conversation, in communion with another fellow human being, and let God lead you from there.
I can't beat that, right? I can't beat that. No. I'll just leave this screen here. There's so many ways that you can volunteer. You can serve on boards and commissions. If you have someone that has rental properties, nonprofits, donating to your nonprofit that of your choice, or participating in their fundraising events, and then affordable housing development, which is the end goal of what we're here for.
Learning about these topics is important. Sharing what you learn with others is important. Reading and staying up on these issues is important. If you do that, you will find lots of opportunities to get engaged. Engagement can be anything from washing feet to making donations. But spreading the word about these issues is important. I mean, on so many days, we myself included, totally take for granted what my life looks like compared to what the thousands and thousands of lives look like around us. And I just encourage you and again commend you for taking this interest alone, but encourage you and encourage myself and encourage all of us to just be mindful of that and try to be as engaged and active as we can. Thank you so much for your attention this morning.
Great. Thank you all so much, Brian. I especially appreciate the shout out to Leviticus. Looking out on this group, a fair number of them have done Bible studies with me over the last 17 years. We start every fall in the Torah, and you cannot swing a dead cat and hear the call of God for those who are at the margins of our society. Loved what you said. Let's close in prayer. Gracious God, we give thanks for your kindness and mercy, and for your clarion call for us to care for those who are least, last, lost, who are the sojourner in our community, the widow, the orphan, the foreigner. So abundantly clear that we're responsible for showing your kindness and mercy. So give to us great creativity as we, as a congregation, try to dream God-sized dreams, how we might be partner with all of these dear folks who are taking the lead on our behalf. Grant us vision and courage and joy in this ministry. For it's in Christ we pray. Amen.